What up, gamers? And today we are going to be talking about the Battle of the Wilderness. The Battle of the Wilderness, one of the most famous battles of the Civil War, is fought, and can you believe it, the wilderness. What is the wilderness? It is the wild. Some would even say it has woods in it. And this battle is up there with the Battle of Antietam and the Battle of Gettysburg as one of the greatest battles ever fought. Greatest as in the sense of it killed a lot of people. One of the top 5 battles in the Civil War killed a lot of people. But I am Matthew Anderson, and today we are going to be presenting this. So, next slide. On one side, we got the Union generals. Obviously, we got Ulysses S. Grant, one of the best generals in human history's ever had, or modern human history ever had. Let's talk about some others first. We got Meade. He was leading 155,000 troops in North at the time. And then under him, we got Sedgwick, Burnside. Also, he has some dope-ass sideburns. Governor Warren, and Winfield Scott Hancock. But let's go back to the main man himself, Ulysses S. Grant. So what's special about Grant? He just got done going down the Mississippi. He captured Vicksburg. He just sieged it after doing some very, very impressive maneuvering to capture it, right? He just got done sieging it. It capitulated. They surrendered, all that stuff, right? Lincoln was like, wow, this dude's impressive. The thing was, everyone else, like McClellan, they were scared to attack. Grant was not scared to attack. Grant knew that he had more troops than the Confederacy could ever dream of. So he used them. So what? He loses 15,000 and Confederacy loses 10,000. Who cares? Because he has so many, he can afford the losses. And if he keeps pushing forth, he'll eventually win. And that was his strategy all along. And Lincoln loved it. There was a famous anecdote of generals going up to Lincoln and saying, dude, this dude's crazy. He's killing so many people. And then Lincoln's like, what's wrong with that? I mean, he's winning, right? And then pretty much it goes along, the generals say that he's an alcoholic. And Lincoln says, well, what beer does he drink? They say bourbon. He's like, well, it sounds like the other generals need some bourbon because he's doing so well. And this quote summarizes it perfect. In every battle, there comes a time when both sides consider themselves beaten. Then he who continues to attack wins. Ulysses S. Grant continues to attack. He continues to push forward. That's his strategy. Push forward, push forward, push forward until they are beaten. So next slide, we got the Confederate generals. These are the bad guys, the bad guys of the war, quote unquote bad guys, right? I mean, yeah. So we'll start with the underlings. Not the big man himself, but the small fish. They're not small fish, but pretty important. James Longstreet, Richard Hill, and Ambrose Hill. But of course, the main person we need to know, Robert E. Lee, second in his class at West Point. Very, 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 very smart. He was a military genius, some would say. Some would even say he was one of the most popular military leaders of his time. He was that impressive. However, he did not always agree with the Confederacy. Let's read a quote from a letter he sent to his son. As an American citizen, I take great pride in my country, for prosperity and institutions, and would defend any state if her rights were invaded. But I can anticipate no greater calamity for the country than a dissolution of the Union. It would be an accumulation of all the evils we complain of, and I am willing to sacrifice everything but honor for its preservation. He just said, believe it or not, unless the states' rights were invaded, the states' rights were violated. Okay? Unless the states' rights were somehow violated, he would defend the Union because he wants to preserve the Union. He doesn't want states to succeed, right? Succeed. So this comes down to the question. A lot of people say, the war wasn't fought over slavery, it was fought over states' right. It was states' right to do what? Right? For slavery. And Robert E. Lee, he wasn't really the biggest fan of slavery. And he was actually friends with Winfield Scott. They talked a lot, right? And people wanted Robert E. Lee to kind of be the head of the Union Army. They asked him, but he declined. And ultimately, he was an American, but before that, he was a statesman. And he chose his state over America. And that's very unfortunate for him because he was on the losing side because of that. and he never became president also. If he was on the Union side, there was a chance he could have become president and been super famous, but we'll never know. Alternate history. So moving on, next slide, we got the overview of the Overland Campaign. This was the campaign that led to Robert E. Lee's surrender. What did this campaign accomplish? It accomplished, again, the starting point, Battle of the Wilderness. That's what we're going to be focusing on. But just to give a quick summary of the whole campaign, it pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed Lee down to Richmond. And instead of sieging Richmond itself, Grant did some shenanigans, went around Richmond, crossed the James River, and sieged Petersburg. After trying to break through the siege a couple times, go in the city, one day the floodgates were open and they just poured in and they captured the city. They had the military building set on fire in Richmond, and the fires went a little bit too out of hand, and it caused all the buildings set on fire, so they had to go in there and, be firemen. In the meantime, Lee decided to skedaddle. He headed westward. Grant followed him, did some more fighting. They went to a nice man's home, Wilmore McLean's home, and they surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse, where Grant had a massive hangover, and that kind of got fixed when he heard that he wanted to surrender. So next slide is pictures. It's pictures. Pictures of what? I mean, what all these pictures have in common? Believe it or not, trees, as the answer. These all look like trees. But what about these trees? Look how dead they look. Where's the life in them? You gotta keep in mind, this battle was fought in May. These don't look like May trees. These look like burnt trees. I wonder why that is. Maybe they caught on fire or something. I guess we'll never know. But as you can see, very, very dense woods here. Bottom right photo does show the open field. There is. But for the most part, dense woods. Cavalry, ineffective. Gotta get off them horses. Artillery, pretty much useless. It does work, but it's ain't gonna be as accurate. So next slide. The battle itself. It's pretty much two battles. But we got two main points of contingency. Okay. Wilderness Tavern on the left side. Okay. And then the main two battles are Orange Turnpike and Orange Plank Road. Okay. Orange Plank Road being on the right side of the map, Orange Turnpike being on the left side of the map. And on the left side, you got Ewell. I don't know how to say his name. I'm bad with words. And you also got, he's on the Confederacy. You got Sedgwick and Warren on the Union side. Grant and Meade be doing their thing, head of command. On the right side, you got Hill and Lee. And then you got Hancock on the Union side. And this is a quote from one of the Union soldiers. This was May 5th, 1980. 1964. 1864, by the way. Numbers are hard. This is a quote from one of the soldiers. Arose at daybreak, got breakfast, and fell into line, then resumed our march southward. Saw General Grant for the first time, marching very slow, very warm. Fighting commenced at 11 o'clock a.m. and continued that all day until after dark. Saw General Burnside. He is here with 6,000 men. We captured 500 men today. The picket firing lasted all night, slept on the ground with my knapsack for a pillow and the canopy of heaven for a tent. So, doing pretty good. He's getting shot at a lot, but other than that, he saw a couple of cool dudes, so he's doing pretty good. So let's talk about this. There was some fighting that happened a little bit. There wasn't a lot of fighting that happened on May 5th, but there was some. The main bulk of the fighting did happen on May 6th. There was a battle, Saundersville, that happened, but overall, it was just nothing that intense. It was mainly people fighting, people maneuvering. I mean, there was a lot of bloodshed, but nothing. Look, I want to go over the next scene. We'll be honest with you. So we're going over the next day. Next slide. Okay, this is what I find interesting. Personally, this is me. Actions of 5 a.m. May 6th. Wadsworth is coming in on the flanking side of Hill, and Getty is holding the intersection between Barkwood and Orange Plank Road. This is my favorite part of Orange Plankload and Blackload. This one I like. So Getty is like, the wall, and Hill was trying to penetrate the wall, but Hill ain't doing too hot right now. His troops ain't doing too hot. So we're gonna go to the next slide and see how that turns out for Hill. As you can see, Hill is no longer there. Why? He kind of had a skedaddle because Longstreet came in. When Longstreet comes in, he kind of got reinforcements, new soldiers, and this lasted from 6 to 10 a.m. And then the next slide, we can see that Sewell is going to push the flank of them, and this happens at 11 a.m. And the next slide, this is the actions between 2 to 6 p.m. overall. So this, as you can see, one thing, Burnside has showed up, which is, typical Burnside, right? Not much position-wise has changed, okay? The intersection is still contested, as you can see, Block Road and Orange Plank Road. The Union has a big line on Block Road, and Field and Kershaw are trying to attack it and push into it. And then, as you can see, Orange Turnpike Road, they are protecting it at Saunders Field, like I said, on May 5th. There was a battle on May 5th on Saunders Field. But again, this is more just this battle was very, very complicated. And the reason it was so complicated, I'm going to get off a little off on the side here, if you don't mind. But the reason this battle was so complicated is because the woods were so dense, like I was speaking earlier. I did a little bit of something called foreshadowing and talked about how the woods, caught on fire, right? And so what happened is when these people were fighting in these conditions, no one could see what the hell was going on. There was so much muzzle smoke, there's smoke everywhere. They had to go off of visual cues, and they were just shooting at anything they heard. It could be Bob, their best friend. They shot in that direction. They just killed Bob. Friendly fire happened a lot during this incident. And there was a lot of casualties because, again, it was so dense. Now, Lee did have the defensive position. He knew that Grant had a much bigger army, 155,000 men, to Lee's about half that, 65,000 men. So he negated that size advantage by saying, hey, only a certain amount of people got to come in here. You can't put all your people in here, so it's going to be even. And Lee also had the defensive position, but guess what? It was a draw. Lee stood his ground in a sense, but Lee had to retreat. Lee stood his ground because he didn't get his ass kicked completely. But Grant did force Lee to retreat, if you will. So this battle was a draw in a sense. But let's go back to our good friend S.B. Cummins, the Union soldier. May 7th, okay? The fighting commenced at daylight. The cannons were like several charges were made, but very little was accomplished on either side. That's kind of a theme throughout this fight. Captain Billings of my own company and Nicholas Becks, my old bunkmate, were both killed by the same shell, and several more comrades belonging to Company F of our regiment were killed and wounded. The Provost Guard were deployed as skirmishers in the rear of the line of battle to take charge of the prisoners if any taken and to hold the stragglers in check. Our lines were broken. The rebels made a grand charge on the 1st Division of the Old Sixth Corps. After a hard struggle, our line was broken and driven back to the Provost Guard, fixed bayonets, and stopped every man. Our line was soon formed again, and after dark, the Old Sixth Corps charged on the rebels and drove them out of the breastworks that had taken from us before 10 o'clock in the evening. What can we get from that? One, poor guy lost his 2 friends. Second of all, bayonets. Bayonet charges were used a lot in here. This was a lot of bayonet chargings. And as you can see, the third thing we can get is Union had land. Confederacy took land. Union took it back. No one's gaining anything, right? They're back where they started, okay? A lot of lives lost just for where they started. But that's kind of the point. The point is just to wound down for Lee to eventually want to retreat and again can keep pushing forward. That's kind of the whole point of the plan. So next slide. The aftermath. The right side is a photo of a hospital of Union soldiers. As you can see, these soldiers are not doing too good. And these are the lucky ones. Remember the fire I was talking about earlier? If some of the soldiers weren't able to get out exactly, the muzzles causes the woods to catch on fire. And usually, if you're lying on the ground from a few gunshot wounds and not able to move and wanting someone to help find you, pick you up, that's going to be kind of hard to do when there are flames all around you and you're burning to death. So a lot of people died from smoke inhalation and getting caught on fire because the woods caught on fire from all the gunfire. S.B. Cummins, primary source in his diary, May 8th. This is my favorite passage so far. Arose at daylight, marched 8 miles very fast. And you gotta keep in mind, this was a massive battlefield. I don't think I've mentioned it, but this was a massive battlefield. Excuse me. I believe it was like something crazy, like 12 miles by 11 miles. I could be wrong though. I believe it was 12 miles by 11 miles. Don't quote me on it. So he marched about 8 miles very fast, which is still in the battlefield. Very warm today. We passed out ambulances loaded with our wounded comrades and saw lots of men laying by the roadside that were wounded. Some with a leg off, some with an arm off, some a hand, some a foot. I tell you, it was a very hard sight to behold. We passed through Chancellorsville and also through a dense pine forest. We saw lots of dead and wounded all alongside the road. Canoting in the morning, but not much fighting today. But at dark, we made a charge on the rebel breastworks and drove them from their positions. We cut them down dreadfully. The ground was covered with the dead and dying. They lay like sheaves of wheat in a harvest field. Our men slept in the breastworks and rifle pits they had captured. That is brutal. This dude walking along 8 miles, seeing ambulances carry his friends, his comrades, back there. While he's walking for 8 miles, he sees tons of dead people. So many people that are like sheaves of wheat. That's how many dead people he sees. This was a massive, massive bloodbath. Massive. The casualties being, dead and wounded. Union, 17,666. This also counts captured and missing. The Confederacy, 11,033, with 2,246 on the Union side being killed, 12,000 being wounded, and on the Confederacy side, 1,477 were killed and 7,866 were wounded. Massive numbers. These are massive numbers, and the public did not like this. The public started calling Grant a butcher, pretty much. He was known for a butcher. Why? Because he's butchering his men. They were having war exhaustion at this point. They were tired of being in the war. They didn't want to be in the war, right? They just wanted it to be over. And here's what made Grant different. This is the most important takeaway from the aftermath. Is not the amount of lives that were lost, but this, when Grant came to the troops, every other general before Grant, they would attack Lee, and then they'd retreat. Then they attack Lee, and then they retreat. So when Grant came, they attacked Lee, and all the troops expected for them to retreat. Grant said, no, we're going to keep going. They all started cheering and hollering, and, hallelujah. They were so excited that they finally had a general who had a brain and knew that he could win this war if they just kept going. And also, again, to bring it home the point about the casualties were so high. Not Lincoln, Grant went in his tent and started crying because of how many men were dying from this battle. It was massive bloodshed, but he knew he had to do it. He had no choice. This was the quickest, the most efficient winning strategy because this war had been going on for so long. It was brutal. And shortly after this, it only took, less than a year before Lee surrendered. I mean, with a big part of it being the siege of, the siege of Richmond, if you will. But yeah, the modern historical view of this battle was this is the beginning of the end for Lee. This is when, as soon as Lincoln put Obviously, Antietam was pretty much the end of the Confederacy, but this is the ultimate. This is like the fifth nail in the coffin, right? Uh, because of this, because of Grant wanting to keep pushing forward, Lee had no hope. There was nothing he could do. The only thing Lee could do before was what he was doing and just scare them away and don't come near us. We're fine. Leave us alone. Grant came in and kicked down the door and said, "No, that ain't gonna happen." And ever since then, yeah. But this battle is one of the most interesting battles that I have researched about, mainly due to its very, very, very complicated nature of all the intricacies and how different it was. For example, catching the woods catching on fire and stuff. And the next slide would be the end. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something. And if you didn't, I am sorry. There's no refunds. Thank you.